Welcome back. Today's video is about the breed origin and history of Katahdin hair sheep. And this one hits home for me because the breed was developed in Maine by Michael Piel. And he started in the 1950s with the importation of some hair sheep from the Caribbean islands. At the time, he had several thousand sheep already on the Piel farm. His aim was to remove wool as a selection criteria for the lambs, and he wanted to do that with the combination of the hair coat, prolificacy, and hardiness of the Virgin Islands sheep. But he also wanted to blend that with the conformation and rate of growth of the wool breeds. He began to experiment with his crosses of the hair sheep and the various British breeds, especially the Suffolk. After about 20 years of crossing the resulting hybrids, in quote, every conceivable combination, unquote, and selecting the individuals with the desired traits, Piel eventually collected a flock of ewes and he called them the Katahdins, named after Mount Katahdin in Maine. During the 1970s, the Wiltshire horn breed, a shedding breed from England, was incorporated into the flock to add size and improve carcass quality. Later in the breed's history, there were studies of internal parasite tolerance in Arkansas, which indicated that the Katahdin sheep actually possessed a significantly higher degree of parasite resistance compared to wool sheep. Heat tolerance trials also demonstrated a similar relationship. A little bit more about breed history. There are currently about 100 million hair sheep around the world, 10% of the world's sheep population altogether. Now, 90% of those hair sheep are in Africa, Latin America, and the Caribbean. The Katahdin breed, as I said, originated at the Piel farm in north central Maine, where Michael Piel was an innovator and basically an amateur geneticist. His first intentions with sheep were actually using them to graze power lines to reduce the mowing and spraying of those areas. Michael Piel moved to Maine after World War II, where he raised Corriedales and Columbias, but the market for wool got him thinking about a meat sheep that wouldn't need shearing. And I actually find this point kind of interesting because my dad went to Maine after retiring from the Army, being a Vietnam vet, so it seems to be a refuge for some really cool people. In 1956 and 1957, Piel began making inquiries about hair sheep after seeing pictures in the National Geographic magazine, and he contacted Richard Bond of the U.S. Agricultural Research Service in St. Croix, Virgin Islands, and they had working hair sheep flocks at the time. Piel imported African hair sheep, as they were called, in November of 1957 from St. Croix into Maine. The criteria for the animals were that they had to be born as triplets, they had to be unrelated for many generations, and they had to be woolless, along with their siblings being woolless. One of the females was tan, the other females were all white. Now, the ram lamb King Tut was used on a handful of ewes in December of 57, including Tunis, Southdown, Hampshire, Suffolk, and African ewe lambs to breed. From this point, crosses of many breed combinations were made as Piel tried to determine what would create the type of ewe that he was looking for. He was particularly selecting for hair coat, meat type conformation, high fertility, and flocking instinct. In the 1970s, Michael Piel began to feel like he was close to his goal of a meat sheep that did not need to be sheared. He selected from the large flock that he had 120 of the best ewes and called them Katahdin sheep, again after Mount Katahdin in Maine, the highest peak in the state of Maine. In October of 75, Piel imported another handful of Wiltshire horn sheep from Wales via Canada. He intended to improve the size and bone by incorporating the Wiltshire into the Katahdins. The first crosses were born in 1976. At this time, Paul and Margaret Jepson of Vermont had become acquainted with Piel while trying to locate these Wiltshire horn stock and decided the newly developed Katahdins would suit them better. They purchased some sheep from Piel in about the mid-70s and established the first satellite flock of Katahdin sheep. The Jepsons then experimented with incorporating St. Croix blood, another hair sheep breed akin to the original African hair type, into their flock in the early 1980s. In 1976, Michael Piel died unexpectedly from a heart attack in December. Now, the Wiltshire horn influence in the herd continued through the late 70s as scale and bone improved somewhat. But what they found was there was an undesirable presence of horns, there was a more flighty nature in the animals, decreased prolificity, and basically the flocking instinct had decreased as well. So during the 80s, under the leadership of Barbara Piel and the farm manager Charles Brown, flock selection was against horns, thus diminishing the Wiltshire genetic influence into the Katahdin breed and strengthening basically the maternal traits once again. Later on, Heifer Project International, an international livestock development charity, took an interest in Piel's work and improved his hair sheep. HPI realized that the Katahdins were well suited to the southern United States and built a sizable flock at their center in Arkansas through the 80s based on the stock from Piel Farm and the Jepsons. Katahdin Hair Sheep International was incorporated in 1985 as a breeders association and registry by the Piel Farm, Heifer Project, and Donald Williams. The first inspection of animals from the original flock registry book was conducted in 1986 by Stan Musgrave, an animal scientist from Maine familiar with Piel and his flock. The first KHSI membership was accepted in 1987, and 23 breeders agreed to join this organization and register their Katahdin stock. Interest and enthusiasm for the breed is delivered steadily over those early days. Over 35 years later, at the end of 2020, KHSI has registered and recorded nearly 173,000 animals and has a current membership of 1,500 members. It's been a pleasure to acquaint you a little bit with the origin of the breed and their history. These are amazing animals. Out of all the livestock that we have personally raised, these sheep are just indestructible. They can deal with freezing rain, they can deal with heat, they can deal with the wind. Here in Kansas, we have a little flavor of all the bad when it comes to weather, and they're just amazing animals. So if you're encouraged by learning about the history of these animals, I would say go ahead and do your research, find out if they're a fit for you, get everything set up, and maybe incorporate them into your farm or ranch. Thank you again for your time.